Jesus cast out demons with a single word. But what he did before he spoke, the internal focus, the shift in consciousness, the positioning of his awareness, that part was never taught. The secret to casting out spirits isn't in the volume of your voice or the authority of your words. It's in where you're standing internally when you speak. Before Jesus performed every exorcism and deliverance, he entered a specific state. Not prayer, not fasting, not spiritual warfare as you've been taught. Something else entirely. A focus that aligned him so completely with the Father's authority that demons had no choice but to obey. And this method, this pre-deliverance focus Jesus used, was deliberately suppressed. Removed from public teaching because it gave ordinary believers access to a power the institutional church couldn't control. By the end of this video, you'll understand what Jesus did before casting out spirits, why it was hidden, and how you can access the same authority he demonstrated. This changes everything you thought you knew about spiritual warfare and deliverance ministry. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. These teachings don't stay visible for long. The algorithm doesn't always favor truth that challenges institutional control. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, because this is just the beginning of what was hidden. This is the secret focus. And you're about to learn it. Jesus cast out demons with a single word. But what he did before he spoke, the internal focus, the shift in consciousness, the positioning of his awareness, that part was never taught. The secret to casting out spirits isn't in the volume of your voice or the authority of your words. It's in where you're standing internally when you speak. Before Jesus performed every exorcism and deliverance, he entered a specific state. Not prayer, not fasting, not spiritual warfare as you've been taught. Something else entirely. A focus that aligned him so completely with the Father's authority that demons had no choice but to obey. And this method, this pre-deliverance focus Jesus used, was deliberately suppressed. Removed from public teaching because it gave ordinary believers access to a power the institutional church couldn't control. By the end of this video, you'll understand what Jesus did before casting out spirits, why it was hidden, and how you can access the same authority he demonstrated. This changes everything you thought you knew about spiritual warfare and deliverance ministry. This is the secret focus, and you're about to learn it. If you grew up in charismatic or Pentecostal Christianity, you've seen deliverance ministry. Maybe you've participated in it. You've watched someone command demons to leave in Jesus' name. You've heard the shouting, the rebuking, the spiritual warfare prayers that go on for hours. I bind you, spirit of fear. In the name of Jesus, I command you to leave. I break every generational curse. I renounce every demonic stronghold. The louder, the more forceful, the more aggressive, the more powerful the deliverance is supposed to be. You're taught that spiritual warfare is a battle, that you need to fight, to wrestle, to contend with demonic forces using the authority of Jesus' name. And sometimes it works. Sometimes the person is set free. Sometimes there's breakthrough, deliverance, genuine transformation. But other times, most times, if we're being honest, nothing happens. The person remains bound. The oppression continues. The demon doesn't leave. And you're told it's because you didn't have enough faith. There was hidden sin in your life. You didn't fast long enough. The demon was too strong and required more prayer. You didn't use the right formula or the right words, so you try again, you pray harder, you shout louder, you fast longer, you rebuke more forcefully, and still, the breakthrough doesn't come. Because what you were taught about deliverance, about casting out spirits, is missing the most critical element. The element Jesus demonstrated every single time he encountered a demon, but that no one taught you to recognize. It wasn't what he said. It was where he was standing internally when he said it. And this method, this pre-deliverance focus Jesus used, was deliberately suppressed. Removed from public teaching because it gave ordinary believers access to a power the institutional church couldn't control. By the end of this video, you'll understand what Jesus did before casting out spirits, why it was hidden, and how you can access the same authority he demonstrated. This changes everything you thought you knew about spiritual warfare and deliverance ministry. This is the secret focus, and you're about to learn it. Go back to the gospel accounts. Not to admire them, but to observe them, to study what Jesus actually did when he encountered demonic spirits. Look at the pattern. Mark 1:21-28. The man in the synagogue. Jesus is teaching in Capernaum when a man with an unclean spirit cries out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. And Jesus responds. But before he speaks, Mark says something subtle. Jesus rebuked the spirit. The Greek word is epitaimao. It means to censure, to charge, to express disapproval with authority. But notice, Jesus doesn't shout. He doesn't engage in a battle. He doesn't argue with the demon or enter into spiritual warfare as we understand it. He simply says, "Be silent and come out of him." One sentence. No elaborate binding prayers. No warfare declarations. No rebuking bloodlines or breaking generational curses. And the demon leaves immediately. Violently, yes, the man convulses, but it leaves. Without resistance. Without a fight. Mark 5, 1-20. The Gadarene demoniac. Jesus encounters a man so possessed that he lives among the tombs, cutting himself with stones, screaming day and night. No one can bind him. He breaks every chain. The demons recognize Jesus from a distance and cry out, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." Notice, they're begging. They're not fighting. They're not resisting. They recognize something in Jesus that terrifies them. And Jesus doesn't enter into extended spiritual warfare. He doesn't fast for days. He doesn't gather a prayer team. He simply commands, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And then he asks the demon's name, not because he needs information, but as an act of authority. He's demonstrating dominion, and the demons obey. They ask permission to enter the pigs, and Jesus grants it with a single word, "Go." 2,000 demons. One word, instant obedience. Mark 9:14-29, the boy with the seizure spirit. This is the account that reveals the most. Jesus comes down from the Mount of Transfiguration to find his disciples trying and failing to cast a demon out of a boy. The demon has been throwing the boy into fire and water, trying to destroy him. The disciples have tried everything they know, and nothing has worked. When Jesus arrives, he asks how long the boy has been afflicted. The father says, "From childhood." And then he says something heartbreaking. "If you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." And Jesus responds with something that sounds almost like frustration. "If you can, all things are possible for one who believes." Then the text says, Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." The demon leaves. The boy appears dead, but Jesus takes his hand and raises him up, completely delivered. Later the disciples ask privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" And Jesus' answer is revealing. This kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer. But wait, Jesus himself didn't stop to pray before casting it out. He didn't kneel down and intercede. He didn't fast. He simply spoke, and the demon obeyed. So, what did he mean? He meant that deliverance doesn't come from the words you speak. It comes from the place you're operating from when you speak them. And that place, that interior positioning, that state of alignment with the Father, is what prayer cultivates. Not prayer as begging, not prayer as asking, but prayer as union, as alignment, as abiding in the presence and authority of God so completely that when you speak, it's not you speaking, it's the Father speaking through you. That's the secret. That's the focus. And that's what they never taught you. Look at what happens in every account. Jesus encounters the demon. There's a moment, brief, almost imperceptible, of interior positioning. Jesus speaks from authority, not effort. The demon obeys immediately. What happens in that moment between encounter and command? What is Jesus doing internally that gives his word such absolute authority? He's not psyching himself up. He's not trying to generate faith. He's not working himself into a spiritual frenzy. He's aligning. He's positioning. He's entering the place where he and the Father are one, where his will and God's will are not two separate things, but a single unified reality. And from that place when he speaks, he's not speaking to the demon as Jesus the man. He's speaking from the consciousness of the Father, from the place where all authority exists, from the dimension where demonic powers have no ground, no right, no ability to resist. Think about what the demons themselves say. "I know who you are, the Holy One of God. What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" They're not responding to Jesus' human personality. They're responding to the presence they recognize in him. The Father, the Source, the authority against which no darkness can stand. And here's what's crucial. Jesus didn't access that authority because he was the Son of God in a way you're not. He accessed it because he knew how to position his consciousness in union with the Father, and he taught his disciples to do the same. In the book of Acts, we see the disciples performing the same deliverances Jesus did. Peter, John, Philip, Paul, they're casting out demons with the same ease, the same authority, the same immediate obedience. Acts 16 tells us that Paul was so annoyed by a demon-possessed girl following him around that he finally turned and said to the Spirit, "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And it came out that very hour. No elaborate ritual, no extended spiritual warfare, just a command from a place of authority. The early church knew how to do this. They understood that deliverance wasn't about technique or formula. It was about positioning, about consciousness, about where you were standing internally when you engaged the demonic realm. But as Christianity spread and became institutionalized, something shifted. By the 3rd and 4th centuries, when the church was becoming the official religion of the Roman Empire, the bishops and councils faced a problem. If ordinary believers could cast out demons with the same authority Jesus had, what did they need priests for? If anyone who had aligned themselves with the Father's presence could speak with that kind of power, then the institutional hierarchy became unnecessary. The mediation became optional. The control dissolved. And so gradually, deliverance ministry was professionalized. It was moved into the hands of trained exorcists. Special prayers were created. Rituals were developed. The Roman ritual of exorcism, codified in 1614, turned what Jesus did in a single sentence into a 27-page liturgical procedure that only ordained priests could perform. The method, the interior positioning, the focus, the consciousness alignment, was removed from public teaching. And in its place, Christians were given formulas, spiritual warfare strategies, binding and loosing prayers that kept them busy, but didn't give them access to the actual authority Jesus demonstrated, because authority doesn't come from formulas. It comes from union. And union with God, if widely accessed, makes institutions unnecessary. So the secret focus was suppressed, not destroyed. It couldn't be, because it's written right there in the Gospels, but obscured, hidden behind elaborate theologies about Christ's unique divine nature, buried under doctrines that said only Jesus could operate with that kind of authority because only he was truly God. And ordinary believers were told to pray and hope and fast and fight, but never to simply align with the Father's presence and speak from that place of union, until now. So what is the secret focus? What did Jesus do internally before he cast out spirits? He positioned his awareness in the place where demonic power has no reality. Let me explain that carefully, because it's going to sound mystical, and it is, but it's also intensely practical. When Jesus encountered a demon, he didn't see it from the perspective of a human being confronting an evil entity. He didn't see himself as separate from God, calling on God's power to help him fight. He saw from the Father's perspective. From that consciousness, demons aren't powerful. They're not even real threats. They're parasites, illusions, distortions. They have no authority, no ground, no right to occupy the temple of a human being created in the image of God. And when you see from that place, when you position your awareness in union with the Father, your words carry the weight of absolute reality. Not because you're trying hard, but because you're speaking from the dimension where truth has all authority and lies have none. Jesus said it explicitly in John 14:10. "The words that I say to you I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works." He's not doing the deliverance. The Father is doing it through him. But the Father can only do it through him because Jesus has positioned his consciousness in perfect alignment. He's become the doorway, the vessel, the place where heaven and earth meet. This is the secret focus. Before you cast out a spirit, you must first position yourself in the consciousness of the Father. Not as a separate person calling on God for help, but as someone who has entered the inner room, closed the door to separation, and aligned so completely with divine presence that when you speak, it's God speaking. The demon doesn't obey you. It obeys the reality you're speaking from. So how did Jesus do it? How did he enter that consciousness before each deliverance? The Gospels don't spell it out in detail, but if you watch the pattern, you can see it. He withdrew his attention from the external drama. When the disciples were failing to cast out the demon, they were caught up in the struggle. They were focused on the demon's power, the boy's suffering, their own inability. Jesus didn't engage with any of that. He didn't get pulled into the drama. He stayed centered in his own interior awareness. He anchored in the Father's presence. This is what all his early morning prayer times were cultivating. Not petitions, not requests, but union. He was training his consciousness to rest in the Father's presence so completely that he could access it instantly, even in crisis. When he encountered a demon, he didn't need to go off and pray first. He was already praying, already living in the state of union that prayer creates. He saw the truth, not the appearance. Demons are masters of deception. They create terror, chaos, noise. They make themselves look powerful. But Jesus saw through the appearance. He saw the truth, that darkness has no power where light is present, that lies dissolve in the presence of truth, that separation cannot exist where union is established. He saw from the Father's perspective, where demons are nothing. He spoke from that seeing not as a hope, not as a command he hoped would work, but as a statement of reality. Come out, not please come out, or I'm trying to make you come out. Just, this is what's happening. This is reality. You have no ground here. And because he was speaking from the consciousness of absolute truth, the demon had no choice but to obey. Now you can see why so much modern deliverance ministry fails. It's not that the people don't have faith. It's not that they're not sincere. It's not even that they're not using Jesus' name. It's that they're speaking from the wrong place. They're speaking from the consciousness of a separated self trying to fight a powerful enemy. They're operating from fear, from effort, from the assumption that demons are strong and they need to somehow overcome that strength. And from that consciousness, deliverance becomes a battle, a struggle, a war that sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But Jesus never battled. He never struggled. He never warred. He simply spoke from the place where demonic power is already defeated, where separation is already dissolved, where the Father's authority is the only reality, and the demons obeyed. If you want to cast out spirits with the same authority Jesus had, you don't need more faith. You don't need better formulas. You don't need to shout louder or fast longer. You need to learn to position your consciousness in union with the Father before you speak. You need to enter the secret focus. So how do you do this? How do you enter the secret focus before deliverance? Here's the practice Jesus demonstrated. Step 1. Stop engaging with the demonic manifestation. When you encounter someone who needs deliverance, the demon will try to pull your attention into drama. It will manifest, scream, threaten, create chaos. Don't engage. Don't get pulled into the performance. The demon wants you to see it as powerful. Don't give it that agreement. Instead, withdraw your attention inward, into your own center, into the place of stillness. Step 2. Anchor in the Father's presence. This is where all your prayer practice matters. If you've been cultivating the inner room, if you've learned to enter the place of union with God through breath, through stillness, through the practices we've been recovering, then you can access that presence instantly. Feel it, not as something far away, but as the very ground of your being. The breath moving through you. The awareness is witnessing through you. The Father's presence that has never been absent. Step 3. See the person, not the demon. Demons want you to see them. They want to be the focus. But Jesus always saw the person underneath, the image of God, the temple that was being violated. See from the Father's perspective, this is my child. This is my temple. This darkness has no right here. Step 4. Speak the truth from that place. Not as a wish, not as a command you hope will work, but as a statement of what's already true in the dimension of divine reality. You don't have to shout. You don't have to be aggressive. You simply speak from the place of union, and the demon recognizes the authority and obeys. In the name of Jesus and by the authority of the Father dwelling in me, I command you to leave. You have no ground here. This is a temple of the living God. Come out now. Not hoping it will work, knowing it already has. Remember what the disciples asked after they failed to cast out the demon? Why could we not cast it out? They had tried. They had used Jesus' name. They had done everything they thought they were supposed to do. And Jesus said, this kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer. He wasn't saying they needed to pray more. He was saying they needed to be people of prayer, people who lived in the consciousness of union, people who had cultivated the interior, focused so deeply that they could access it even in crisis. The disciples were operating from technique, from formula, from borrowed authority. But you can't borrow this kind of authority. You have to cultivate it. You have to learn to live in the place where you and the Father are one, so that when you encounter darkness, you're already standing in the light. That's what prayer does. Not the prayer of asking, but the prayer of union. The prayer that Jesus practiced in the wilderness, on the mountains, in the early morning hours before anyone else was awake. He was training his consciousness to rest in the Father so completely that accessing that presence became instant, automatic, natural. And from that place, casting out demons wasn't a battle. It was simply speaking the truth that darkness has no power where light dwells. Before we go further, I need to give you a warning. This teaching is powerful, and power can be misused. The sons of Sceva learned this the hard way. Acts 19 tells their story. They were Jewish exorcists who saw Paul casting out demons and thought they could copy the technique. So they tried. "I adjure you by the Jesus whom Paul proclaims." And the demon answered, "Jesus I know, and Paul I know, but who are you?" And the man with the demon attacked them so violently that they fled naked and wounded. Why? Because they were using Jesus' name from the wrong place. From separation. From ego. From the consciousness of technique rather than union. Demons aren't stupid. They know the difference between someone speaking from borrowed authority and someone speaking from the Father's presence. If you try to use this teaching as a technique, as a formula, as a trick, it will fail. And worse, it might backfire. This isn't magic. It's not a shortcut. It's a way of being that requires you to actually align with God, to actually cultivate union, to actually become the kind of person who lives in the Father's presence. You can't fake that. You can't perform it. You can only become it. And becoming it takes practice, takes humility, takes the willingness to let go of your separated sense of self and rest in the Father's presence until that presence becomes more real to you than your own thoughts. If you're not willing to do that inner work, this teaching will do you no good. It might even harm you. But if you are willing, if you're ready to cultivate the secret focus, to learn to position your consciousness in union with the Father, then you'll discover the same authority Jesus demonstrated, not because you're special, but because you've learned to stand where He stood. Let's practice this right now. You don't need to be in a deliverance situation to cultivate the focus. In fact, you shouldn't wait until crisis to learn this. You need to practice it daily, so that when the moment comes, you can access it instantly. Close your eyes if you can. Take a slow, deep breath. Let go of the outer world. Let go of the noise, the demands, the chaos. Withdraw your attention inward. Feel your breath, the life force moving through you. This isn't your breath. It's the Father's breath. The same breath that filled Jesus' lungs when He stood before demons. The same Spirit that spoke the universe into being. Now, feel for the presence, not far away, not outside you, but here, closer than your heartbeat, the Father's presence dwelling in you, as you, through you. Rest there. Don't try to feel anything dramatic. Just be still, be present. Let yourself remember that you're not separate from God, that the kingdom is within you, that the same authority that dwelled in Christ dwells in you now. From this place, imagine speaking to darkness, not with fear, not with effort, but with the quiet certainty of someone who knows that light has already won. You don't have to say anything out loud. Just feel what it's like to speak from this place, to know with absolute certainty that when you speak from union with the Father, reality itself obeys. This is the secret focus, and the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. Until one day when you encounter someone who needs deliverance, you won't need to think about it. You'll simply withdraw inward, align with the Father's presence, and speak the truth. And the demons will obey. Not because you're powerful, but because you're speaking from the place where all power exists. This is just the beginning. There's so much more to learn about operating in spiritual authority the way Jesus did. How to discern between demonic oppression and psychological trauma. How to protect yourself when engaging in deliverance. How to cultivate the interior focus so deeply that it becomes your natural state. How to minister to people after deliverance so they stay free. All of that requires deeper training. More practice, guidance from those who've walked this path. We've compiled the advanced teachings in the sacred scrolls, not just theory, but practical instruction. The prayers the early church used, the interior practices that cultivate union, the wisdom that was removed from public teaching because it was too powerful to give away freely. If you're serious about learning to operate in the authority Jesus demonstrated, not just in deliverance, but in every area of spiritual life, the scrolls will take you deeper. You'll find them in the description below. And if you want to learn alongside others who are cultivating this same focus, who who are practicing union with the Father daily, who are discovering what it means to speak from divine authority. We've created a community for that, not a place for debate or theology, a place for practice, for walking together, for encouraging each other in the cultivation of the secret focus that changes everything. The link is in the description. But whether you go deeper or stop here, you now know the secret. You've learned what Jesus did before he cast out spirits. You understand why modern deliverance so often fails, and how to access the same authority the early church operated in. The question now is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you practice the focus? Will you cultivate the union? Will you learn to stand where Jesus stood so that when you speak, reality itself obeys? The choice is yours. For 2,000 years, Christians have been taught that casting out demons requires spiritual warfare, elaborate rituals, hours of prayer, and fasting. But Jesus did it with a word, a single command from a place of absolute authority, and now you know why. Not because he was God and you're not, but because he had learned to position his consciousness in perfect union with the Father, so that when he spoke, he was speaking from the source itself. That same union is available to you. That same authority is accessible. That same focus can be cultivated. But it requires practice. It requires humility. It requires the willingness to let go of your separated sense of self and rest in the Father's presence until speaking from that place becomes as natural as breathing. If you're ready for that journey, if you're ready to learn the secret focus and walk in the same authority Jesus demonstrated, then you're exactly where you need to be. The teaching has returned. The method has been recovered. The secret is no longer suppressed. And you've just learned what was hidden. Now go practice. Go cultivate. Go learn to stand in the place where darkness has no power and light is the only reality. Speak from there, and watch what happens. The demons will obey. Not because you're special, but because you've learned to speak from the place where all authority exists. This is the secret focus, and it's been waiting for you all along.